Story 1. When my mother's brother died, we went to clear out his house. His sister was so worried about making sure she got every dime he had. Even though she had already taken control of his bank accounts, she believed he had hidden money in the house. She took all of his guns and searched everywhere for money. My mother was trying to move his things out like a normal person, and I will never forget his sister saying, "To hell with this. Find the money." She finally gave up and left the house to my mother, my husband, and me. My son was about 2 years old at the time and doing typical 2-year-old things. He found a jar somewhere in the living room that had $11,000 in it. We almost passed out. We stood there stunned. I asked my mother if she was going to tell his sister, and she said, "Yes, when we get to heaven." We split the money, and it is still a secret. Story 2. A former friend did not know she was pregnant and gave birth at 9 months with cocaine in the baby's system because she was constantly blackout drunk and partying. She was 40 years old. I found out that her ex-husband, to whom she had an unhealthy attachment, was still in her life. He had been convicted on child pornography charges and had to register as a sex offender. Child Protective Services was assigned because the baby was born with cocaine in the system. She gave my information and the information of several other friends to the Child Protective Services worker for character references. Everyone else lied and did not mention the ex-husband, who was around the child. I told the Child Protective Services worker everything. I provided all the court documents I had found online and showed him the registry entry. The mother had her baby removed and was furious. I did not care because that child did not have a mother who would protect him and did not even have friends who would look out for him. I berated myself afterward and had a brief nervous breakdown that I worked through extensively with a therapist. As a survivor of sexual abuse by a parent, I refused to pretend this was not my problem. Since then, I have cut her out of my life and never looked back. Story 3. My parents were severely neglecting their dog, so I stole the dog and gave it to the Humane Society. They were very outraged, but the dog was starving. I never told anyone it was me. Story 4. I filed a report with Child Protective Services against my lifelong friend. I went to visit her house after she had children, and it was a literal biohazard. Animal waste caked into the carpet, which was so worn it looked white. You could smell ammonia from cat urine before you even entered the house. 2 of the girls had severe coughing fits from the poor air quality. There was mold, blood, and dirt everywhere. I took photos secretly while I was there, and the next day filed the report. My friend called me, sobbing, because Child Protective Services had taken her children until she proved she could clean and maintain the house. I pretended it was not me. She did fix the house and got her children back. Those children did not deserve to live in such awful conditions, and I feel no guilt for what I did. I will never tell her that I was the one who made that report. Story 5. When my grandfather died, the relatives wanted to bury him with the family ring on his finger. The family ring had been passed down through generations and was supposed to become mine someday. I did not care about getting the ring. It has little, if any, monetary value, but burying a family treasure was and still is obviously wrong. On the day of the funeral, I stole the ring from the coffin and hid it in a safe place. Decades later, I still keep the ring hidden. Someday I am going to pass it to my grandson and tell him the story. Or not. I do not know. My precious. Story 6. At a garage sale, my mom bought a small end table that doubled as an enclosed, fancy spoon display case. I found a lock hidden on the bottom with the key taped next to it. I unlocked the case, moved the spoons to form 3XS, relocked the case, and hid the key in my room. It happened on a Friday the 13th. It terrified my family because no one knew the case opened. I did this randomly on bad weather days, Halloween, anniversaries of bad events, and days I did not want to go to school for most of my childhood. After 10 years, my dad finally threw the table away because he had had enough of everyone panicking. Story 7. I witnessed my niece's first steps. I told no one and acted surprised when she did it again a few hours later in front of her parents. Story 8. During the summer of 1964, when I was 12 years old and walking through the library parking lot, I noticed someone had left the key in a 1961 Chevrolet Impala, so I borrowed the car for a 10 to 15-minute ride through town. I returned it to a different spot in the parking lot. I had never told anyone before. Story 9. My time. My wife loves Duolingo. She has Duolingo Premium so she doesn't see ads. In the Duo shop there was a plush of the owl. I bought it, hid it, and repackaged it. I printed a fake packing slip and address label and made a letter with Duolingo's header. The week after she reached a 1,000-day streak, I left it on our front door as a gift from Duolingo. The card congratulated her on joining the 1,000 club. She loved it and felt very accomplished. It now sits next to her computer. I planned it as a joke, but she was so happy I can never tell her. Story 10. In 1994, my best friend and roommate died while his extended family slept. I did not tell anyone for an hour. He had acquired immune deficiency syndrome, Kaposi sarcoma, and non-Hodgkin lymphoma. He had not been awake for almost 3 days. 6 months earlier, he weighed 170 pounds. When he died, he weighed under 100 pounds and looked like a skeleton wrapped in paper. A week before he died, his extended family came to stay in our house. His mother, his 2 sisters, and their husbands slept in the living room and guest bedrooms. It was about 3 in the morning when I returned after using the bathroom to sit with him. After about half an hour, his breathing became shallow and labored. I held his hand. About 30 minutes later, his breathing stopped altogether. I did not tell anyone in the moment because his mother would have called emergency services, started cardiopulmonary resuscitation, and used a bag valve mask and other resuscitation measures. She had argued with him to get him to stay in the hospital and had been, understandably, difficult. He had told me and them that he did not want any of that. He was so tired, and without the constant morphine he was in so much pain. I left the room and went back to mine. His sister found him about an hour later. Love and miss you, Charles. Story 11. My younger brother thinks he found a crisp $100 bill on the sidewalk on the worst day of his life, the day his fiancée left him. Truth is, I dropped it there and pretended to tie my shoe so he would spot it first. I was broke too. That was my grocery money for the month, but he needed a win from the universe so badly. We ate ramen for weeks, but seeing him smile for the first time in days was worth it. He still talks about his lucky day 8 years later. Story 12. My brother had a child from a one-night stand. The woman was much older and kept the child. He has no information beyond that and does not want to pursue it. Story 13. I always tell my cat she is doing a good job at things, but she is not. It is never her day for a brain cell. I love her anyway. Edit. Adding my cat photo. Bless all our special kitties who are doing their best here. Story 14. I named my son Wade after Sam Elliott's character in Roadhouse, not in honor of my great-grandfather. Story 15. During high school, we were planning a weekend class trip. There was a girl in my class whom I greatly respected and liked to hang out with. She was the daughter of a war veteran who had post-traumatic stress disorder. He was not violent but had a pretty bad temper, and she had lost her mother to illness when she was a child. Despite that, she was ambitious, driven, confident, and never made herself the victim or sought pity from anyone. Even though we were very different in many ways, that made me respect and like her more because I knew how hard her life had been. One day we were talking about the trip and I kept going on about how excited I was to go. She casually said, "Yeah, I'm not going. We don't have the money." I was left speechless. Felt so unfair and it bothered me all day, so I decided to do something. I knew she was too proud to accept money from someone and would be upset if I suggested borrowing some. When I got home, I talked to my parents and my dad told me to ask the teacher to propose to the other parents that we split the cost and tell the girl the travel agency had given us one free spot. That was usually the deal when there was more than a certain number of students going, but we had not reached that threshold this time. If the other parents did not agree, we would pay for her ourselves. I told the teacher not to mention my name, and she talked to the other parents. Everyone agreed. To make a long story short, my friend received the news about an extra free spot and laughed about getting lucky. She went on the trip with us and had an amazing time. I never told her or anyone else that I had arranged it. It was not a heroic act, but I still feel a rush of happiness and pride for that 16-year-old version of myself. Story 16. One of my relatives killed a very premature infant she had helped deliver in her home. The infant was born to a 13-year-old neighbor who had been raped. No one knew she was pregnant. The relative told me this when she was nearly 100 years old and had dementia. I was 13 and the only person in the room when she said it. Story 17. I discovered that the story I had been told, that my grandfather was a regular German soldier in World War II and had spent a long time in a Soviet prisoner of war camp, was not true. Instead, he joined the Schutzstaffel and was stationed at Auschwitz for about a year. He was later sentenced to 3 years in prison in Poland. He died more than 10 years ago, and I have not told anyone else in my family. My father had a very close relationship with him, and I do not see what good it would do to tell him. Story 18. The mother of one of my best friends was a former sex worker. He did not know. She told me in a drunken moment 30 years ago. She passed away in 2022. Story 19. My best friend committed suicide while we were roommates. He had a psychotic break and stabbed himself to death. I told everyone I was asleep and that I was only woken by the other roommate's girlfriend, who screamed when she found him. In reality, I was wide awake in my bed, terrified, because I had heard him pacing the house and talking to himself or to some other entity about how he planned to kill himself with a knife. I heard him going through the cutlery and asking someone which tool was best to use. I sat in my room with a big hammer in my hand, ready to defend myself. It was absolutely terrifying, and I never told anyone that I experienced the whole thing. To be clear, he was an incredibly kind person, and there had only been one prior incident where he acted strangely. It turned out his family had a history of schizophrenia, and that was likely what happened. The experience was surreal. When the police arrived, instead of letting us go to the hospital to be with him, they interrogated us and treated us like suspects. I think it is hard to believe someone would stab themselves, but eventually they let us see him. Watching his mother lose her only child was one of the most tragic things I have ever experienced, and the whole event changed me profoundly. I still miss him dearly. He was an amazing person. I sometimes feel like a coward for not going out and trying to stop him. This was over 20 years ago, and I am at peace with it. I still think about him mostly out of longing and sadness. I sometimes think about his mother, especially now that I have my own child. When something lucky happens to me, I like to say he is watching over me. I believe it is important to remember him, and my wife and I talk about it occasionally. I do not tell her or others that I was awake through the whole thing. I have decided that part is between me and the universe. Story 20. When I was 15 and my best friend was 16, we borrowed his dad's unmarked police cruiser. His parents were gone for the night, so we drove to where our friends were partying and messed with them. Story 21. My husband always calls me clumsy. One day, while washing up, I smashed 3 of the 4 expensive champagne flutes we bought for our wedding. I bought a brand new set and replaced them the next day. I never told him. Story 22. You should never share a real secret online, no matter how anonymous you feel. Story 23. My parents knew I was being molested by the fire chief of my small town from ages 3 to 8. My father worked for him as a firefighter. My mother was a teacher's aide at my school. Both of them knew and did nothing to stop it. They let it happen to boost their professional careers in the town. As I got older, I began to remember what happened. My parents triangulated my entire family against me and made me out to be crazy and addicted to drugs. I only smoke marijuana sometimes. My mother told everyone in town I was addicted to heroin. I have never used hard drugs and never will. They did this so that if the truth ever came out, no one would believe me. It was a calculated and cruel long con. Meanwhile, I was a confused and severely depressed teenager and young adult. I did not fully remember what happened until I was 30. The little memories and snippets came together through medically assisted therapy. I then went back into my childhood journals and discovered written proof. It broke me. My parents are actually evil and no one else knows. I confronted them by phone. I have always kept a great distance from them and they never spoke to me again. Sometimes I think about writing letters to all my family members with the truth. Maybe someday I will. Until then, it stays with me. I have healed. I am okay. It is an absolute nightmare knowing my parents sexually trafficked me for their own professional and social comfort while my 4 siblings were treated like normal kids and kept safe. It is disturbing knowing they are out there with their grandchildren. It is shocking to find out someone so close to you is actually evil. Edit. I said therapy, but it was not a therapist. It was a doctor and a shaman. My apologies. Formal therapy did not happen for me until recently. Thank you for all your kind responses. Sometimes I push this to the back of my mind so I can live my life and forget how heavy it is. It is nice to be reminded that people are caring. I am sorry to all of you who have gone through something similar or worse. It is a strange hell we live in. I did not know I needed support today, so thank you. Story 24. A friend admitted to me 1 week before his engagement that he loved someone else. He could not leave his fiancée-to-be because both families were heavily invested in the relationship, and he had stopped caring about himself. Story 25. I never stopped being suicidal. I just feel like I missed my chance, and now I am stuck with an entire life that I cannot leave for everyone else's sake. I genuinely did not expect so many people to respond or to see this. To anyone who asked, I am on medications and have been for a long time, and I have been in therapy for almost 10 years. I am nearing 30 and have had depression since I was about 11. I am not actively planning anything drastic, so do not worry. It gets easier to manage, but slowly, and it never truly goes away. To anyone reading who feels the same as I do, I hope we all one day figure this out. There is clearly something worth living for if we are all still here. Thank you for sharing your perspectives. Story 26. I anonymously wrote a letter to a woman I did not know, telling her about the affair her husband was having. The letter contained 4 lines. How long it had been going on, that he had accused her of being an alcoholic, who he was with, and that he had bought his girlfriend the exact same jewelry for Christmas. They divorced. She joined Alcoholics Anonymous and is now living her absolute best life. The girlfriend dumped him when she found out about the jewelry. Story 27. The first word my son said was Papa while we were playing. My wife had worked a night shift at the hospital and was asleep early that morning. I did not tell her and waited for his next word. It was Mama, and she was there to hear it. She was very happy, and I will never tell her the truth. Story 28. A day after finding out my father had an extremely rare and aggressive form of cancer, I learned he was cheating on my mother. He was still in touch with his mistress after being diagnosed. While he was in surgery, I got his phone and contacted her, telling her to cease contact so my mother would not find out. It turned out he had a series of mistresses throughout his life. My mother never found out, and I will not tell my brother, who idolized him. I am currently waiting for him in hospice. He will likely die within the next few days. It has been 6 months since the diagnosis, and I think I have forgiven him, or I am trying to, so I can grieve properly. Story 29. My mentor killed a man in 1995. He was a war criminal who deserved it, but that is beside the point. When he died of old age, the police found an illegal pistol at his house, a different gun, and began an investigation. They refused to release his body for a funeral for over 6 months, claiming the investigation was ongoing. I eventually had to sue to get his body for burial. I have my mentor's written confession and extensive documentation about the murder and how he tracked down his victim. I was willing to hand those materials over to the police and let them take credit for solving a major international cold case. But they were obstructive, so I will not give them the information. Story 30. I removed the bobbin thread from the back seam of my older sister's senior prom dress. When she got into the car, the dress split open, and she had to change into an old dress that did not fit her well and was not as formal for the occasion. Her date was the young man I had been too nervous to ask out 2 months earlier. I had asked my sister for advice, and she said she would talk to him for me. She asked him to prom, and he said yes. Story 31. I witnessed my father-in-law's death. He was cancer-stricken, and we were providing hospice care for him in our guest room. His son, my brother-in-law, had been granted leave from the United States Marine Corps to come see his father before he died. About the same time the son arrived at our house, I checked on my father-in-law and, as far as I could tell, he had already passed away. I did not say anything as my brother-in-law and his wife were about to enter the room. They believe he stayed alive until his son could come home to see him and that my father-in-law sensed his presence and then let himself go. I also once gave a man a hand job. Story 32. My friend killed himself because his best friend and his girlfriend were having sex. His parents still do not know why. The story is so complicated and long that I will not tell it. They knew at 9 a.m. that he intended to kill himself, and they only checked on him at 5 p.m. when I came home and they could no longer hide it. It will always haunt me to see his body and know he waited for someone to come, and that they did not tell the only person who would have. Story 33. My husband found a tiny fledgling bird in the backyard. It had clearly had a rough start in life and was missing an eye. We watched it over the course of a week as it practiced taking off from the ground, and its mother brought it worms to eat. My husband put out a tray of water. We named the fledgling Barney and were rooting for him. One morning I went outside to check on Barney and he was dead, on his side and covered in ants. I put him in a box with a flower from the garden and disposed of him. When my husband woke up, he asked about Barney. I told him that earlier that morning I had seen him take off and fly away with his mother. My husband was so happy and said he wished he had been there to see it. Now, whenever we see a bird of that type nearby, my husband says, maybe it is Barney, and we'll check to see if it is missing an eye. Story 34. When my grandfather had his first heart attack and went into a coma, things looked grim. My uncle went to his house and snooped under the guise of making sure the bills got paid. He found my grandfather's portfolio and discovered that he had just shy of $3 million in savings and investments. What followed was a downward spiral of infighting and greed as my mother and her siblings fought over who would inherit when he died. Then he recovered. He woke up one day, spent months in specialty care, and eventually went home. A few months later, he announced to the family that he had been semi-conscious the whole time, had heard their fighting, and decided they were all getting nothing and that everything was going to charity. A year later, when he had the second heart attack that killed him, the family went into war mode over his money again. They discovered that he had kept his word and donated all but $300,000 before he died. His will left most of what remained to charity and gave everyone else token amounts. My cousins and I received $10,000 each in cash, and his will stipulated that money could be taken from the $300,000 to pay off any outstanding student loans for me or my cousins, with anything left over going to the same charity. My mother, aunts, uncles, his sister, and her children were all given $100 each. The sole exception was one of my cousins who was raising 3 small children as a widow after her husband was killed in an accident. My grandfather paid off her mortgage before he died and made her keep it secret. We did not learn that until years later. My secret is that he was never conscious while in that coma. I recorded those arguments on my phone and played them for him once he was well enough to listen. I am the reason none of them got any of his money. He lied to them so they would not attack me when they discovered they were getting nothing. Story 35. When I was about 6 years old, my mother found my name crudely scratched into our living room coffee table in what seemed to be a copy of my handwriting. There was even a bent paper clip on the table. My mother demanded to know why I had done it, but I said it was not me. I did not know who had done it. I suggested that someone had walked into the house, scratched the table, and left. She probably believed me, but it was me. Story 36. I was abused by my cousins, and even today, more than 20 years later, I cannot talk about it. Story 37. My stepfather forced himself on my mother one New Year's Eve. I heard everything. My brother was born about 9 months later. My mother died, and I went to live with my grandparents. Story 38. I burned down an unoccupied building 34 years ago. Story 39. When I was 4, I was raped by my daycare provider's elderly father, who had dementia. Story 40. My now former friend has a huge tattoo on her forearm, covering it from elbow to wrist. It is misspelled and she does not know it. I fixed the rather funny typo. Story 41. I ate the last piece of apple pie on Thanksgiving and blamed it on my younger brother. Story 42. I was not driving my car when it hit the telephone pole. The girl I had a crush on was. That was 30 years ago. The only people who would care are my parents. Story 43. During this financial downturn, I am struggling to make ends meet. Every day when I go to work, I need a tremendous amount of determination. I rarely talk about it with others and try to appear calm and composed in front of my family. Story 44. I have told many people, but no one believes me, so I am taking this to my grave. In ninth grade science class, our teacher let us play with a bottle of mercury. One student opened it and poured some on his hand. A girl next to him had taken off her rings and wanted to hold the mercury. While she was holding it, the other student took her rings and dipped them in the mercury. The rings were gold but came out silver-colored, like the mercury. She thought it was cool and put the rings back on. She developed leukemia in our senior year and passed away. It was not until many years later in graduate school that I remembered this incident and drew a connection. Several students from that class developed cancer. It may be nothing, but it haunts me. Story 45. My husband is very specific about drying off after a shower. Genitals are dried at the bottom of the towel and the face at the top. Sometimes when I am angry with him, I flip the towel. Story 46. Hey, just for your information, some of these are actual crimes, and Reddit is not as anonymous as everyone thinks. The more you know. Story 47. I know what my uncle did to me when I was a child, but when I asked my mother if she thought he had done anything to me, she said no. I do not know why, but I will not tell my family that I know, even though I am 100% certain they are aware of it. He is dead. Story 48. I once threw a pine cone at a pine tree because it fell on my head. Story 49. Sharon, it was me who farted. She passed away about 5 years ago. It was the rankest fart in the history of humanity. She talked about it for years afterward. Story 50. I was about 7 or 8 years old and my sister was about 9. My mom had made sausages and mashed potatoes for dinner and served 3 plates. One for herself, one for my sister, and one for me. She stepped out of the kitchen to call us for dinner. I sneaked into the kitchen and bit the end off one of the sausages. My sister came into the kitchen and my mom arrived shortly after. Mom noticed the sausage with a bite taken out and immediately accused my sister. My sister tried to plead her case, but I kept quiet. Mom said it could not be me because I was too short to reach. So my sister ended up with the plate that had the bitten sausage. I never admitted it and have regretted it ever since. I believe that was when her villain era began. She is 42 now and is the black sheep of the family. Story 51. I have been receiving a monthly stipend of $350 for a remote internet allowance from a job I quit in 2021. I emailed Human Resources 3 times to correct the issue when I left, but they never replied. The company was acquired by a large conglomerate last year and the payments continued. I deposited every cent into a separate high-yield savings account in case they ask for it back. But at this point, the interest alone is paying for my car insurance. Story 52. About 20 years ago, my friends and I were very high and went to Dairy Queen. I could not finish my ice cream, so I threw it away. However, because of that, I absentmindedly put it in one of the blue mail drop boxes instead of the trash. Would that count as mail tampering? Story 53. Years ago, I had an affair with a married woman. We had an instant connection, and after spending a lot of time together and becoming friends, it just happened. Neither of us expected it, but the chemistry was undeniable. I am a bisexual woman. She had never been attracted to women before me. It was an intensely passionate and emotional affair. She would tell me she wished she had met me before her husband, that she imagined us being together in another life. I felt the same way, but the guilt ate at me. Her husband was a terrible person, an absolute tool who belittled her constantly and was never home. He was always out with his friends and often stayed overnight at his father's place to play video games. She said she did not love him, that her parents had forced them to marry when she got pregnant 7 years earlier. Still, I felt awful. It was eating me away. Yet I could not get enough of her and began imagining a possibility for us to be together. I asked her if she would leave her husband for me, but for various reasons she would not. I wanted someone I could not have. I knew I had to break things off, and after a couple of tries, I did. But it was so hard. We tried to remain friends, but a couple of weeks later she started drinking heavily. It got so bad that we distanced ourselves from each other because she was always angry at me. She would call me crying and furious about her life, and I would beg her to stop drinking. A few months later, I took a new job and moved away. I had to, but I still think about her more often than I would like. Sometimes I wish we had never met in this lifetime. Story 54. Many of these stories are heavy, but I have a funny one. I recently divorced my husband, but we are on very good terms and even friends. We were joking about silly marital secrets, and he told me that when we married and did the first dance, I had bad breath. He said he would have taken that one to the grave. The funny thing is that in 13 years of marriage, I almost never had bad breath, so that was quite the anomaly. I blame the stress of the day and dehydration. That is a good secret. Story 55. I greened out while driving the day after taking an edible. I had felt fine all day, but in the middle of driving, I suddenly felt like I was going to pass out. So I pulled over and parked. I woke to a man knocking on my window telling me the police would show up if I did not get out of there. And then I passed out again. I woke 30 minutes later feeling normal. I was only about 5 minutes from home, so I headed there, only to be immediately pulled over by an officer who was probably waiting for me. Luckily, I am diabetic, so I told him my blood sugar was dangerously low and that I might have had a seizure. I showed him my blood glucose meter and an empty chocolate shake as proof I had been trying to raise my blood sugar. He said he had been going to have me take a sobriety test, but I seemed all right. I apologized profusely for causing a scene and drove straight home carefully. No ticket, no warning, no paperwork. I continued with my day in complete shock. I never took an edible again and never told anyone. I live in fear and embarrassment of that memory, and I am so thankful I did not hurt anyone. Story 56. I unintentionally caused a man to kill himself. I was casually seeing a woman who said she was fully divorced and not separated. She wasn't even in the process of getting divorced. She had just moved out. He found out about me, and it was the breaking point for him. He was already in poor mental health because of the separation. He worked as a bartender at a bar I frequented, so I occasionally interacted with him but didn't know him well. She told me that, in his suicide note, he wrote that he couldn't take her being with anyone else and that she had moved on so quickly. He killed himself, and I was the catalyst. I cut off all communication with her after that because she had lied to me. I still feel guilty. Story 57. I burned down our house when I was in kindergarten. I was playing with matches while hiding in my closet. I had a bunch of papers from school and randomly decided to see if one would burn. It did. I slapped it, which did not help. I panicked, ran downstairs, and hid behind the refrigerator. After a while, firefighters arrived because a neighbor had noticed smoke. My mother was watching television in the living room and did not notice, and my father was at work. When the firefighters opened the door to the stairs, massive amounts of smoke billowed out. Then I heard my mother screaming that her son was upstairs. I froze. The firefighters ran up and, after some time, returned, saying they could not get into my room because the fire was too big. The smoke worsened, and they told my mother to get outside. She was screaming. I began choking on the smoke. A firefighter heard me coughing and found me hiding. They conducted an investigation. My mother said she had heard scratching in the walls the day before. Investigators concluded rats had chewed through the wiring. My parents never recovered and divorced soon afterward. I have never told anyone. Story 58. When I was a kid, I saw a hose running from my neighbor's house. I didn't think anything of it and tossed it into their window well. I was about 6 or 7 years old and didn't appreciate the consequences. I later learned it was the drainage hose from their sump pump, and their entire basement flooded. A year ago, my parents asked me if I remembered when someone tossed that hose down our neighbor's window well, and it was like a light bulb moment. Story 59. When my parents were getting divorced, My mother asked me if my father had ever molested me because she wanted to bring it up in court. I told her no, he never did. She told me to forget she had asked and not to tell anyone. The thing is, my mother, who experienced child sexual abuse herself, was the one who did things to me. I have never told anyone, not even a therapist. My mother is a very complicated person. I feel sad for all the trauma she has been through, but I also resent her for many things. Story 60. I've nodded confidently in conversations I completely misunderstood. Story 61. You are only anonymous here to other users, not to technology company employees. If you signed up to Reddit with an email that can link you to other accounts, then this 3-day-old original post and the people behind it are probably scraping your data and making associations. Do not share anything online that you would not share with strangers. Story 62. My mom has 2 stepsisters who were essentially low-functioning addicts their whole lives. One of them had a son and his father abandoned them shortly after. I am not sure how she never lost custody, but she always chose other men, drugs, alcohol, and other things over her son. When I was in 7th grade, she and her son, who was about 20 at the time, moved in with a man who had a daughter my age. We met at Christmas and really hit it off. We did not see each other much afterward, but we texted sometimes. Later that spring, I had not heard from her in about a month. I woke up one morning to a text she had sent in the middle of the night saying she needed help getting out of there and could not take it anymore. I did not know what to make of the message and figured she had messaged the wrong person. I think I replied asking if she was okay, but I never heard from her again. When I was older, I found out that she and her son were having sex. Her father caught them and kicked him and his mother out. It was statutory rape because she was 12 or 13. I think about her often. I know I was a child, and I deeply regret not telling anybody. I hope she has found peace. Story 63. My parents had a very nasty divorce when I was a teen. Dad was abusive and stole everything from Mom. In court, they fought over some family silverware from his side. He claimed my mom stole it in retribution. She says he is crazy and that he stole it when he broke in and took everything else. They are neutral now, but the silverware is still brought up. The joke is on them. I took the silverware and pawned it to pay my college dorm deposit when both of them refused to help. My student loans had not been disbursed yet, and I was about to lose my housing. Story 64. When I was young, my aunt molested me. At the time, I did not see it as wrong. I thought it was cool to have sex with a woman. When I was about 16, she lost interest in me. Later, several relationships ended because the only way I could get an erection was to imagine a woman raping me. I wondered why I had this rape fantasy. Now I am working on it. Story 65. I won the lottery, equivalent to about $1 million. I invested in gold and bought a flat in one of the big cities. I kept the rest in a separate bank account. I never told anyone, including my family. Story 66. I have eaten the plums that were in the icebox and which you were probably saving for breakfast. Forgive me. They were delicious, sweet, and cold. Story 67. When I was 17, my dad confessed that he did not believe he was my biological father. He said that if I wanted or needed to find out, he would support my decision, but to him I was his child and he never felt the need to get a test. I lived with that until I was 32 and finally decided I wanted to know. I did not want to hurt him, so I took a 23andMe test just to see if it would show anything. It connected me with people on my mother's side who I already knew had taken it, and with several people I had never heard of on the other side. I mostly shrugged it off and tried to forget it, but last month I received a notification from 23andMe that I had a new close deoxyribonucleic acid connection. It was an uncle on my father's side. Using that, I found him on Facebook and then found my father. He lives in my town and has a daughter 5 years older than me. As far as I know, he has no idea I exist, and my dad does not know that I found out. I will never tell him. He is more than enough for me and has been the greatest father I could have wished for. I think it would break his heart to learn his suspicions were correct and that I went looking for the other man. I just cannot hurt him like that. So no one knows except me and a bunch of strangers online. Story 68. When I get bored, I create alternate accounts and post bullshit confessions on Reddit to see how many end up on BuzzFeed. Story 69. I was the one who scratched my dad's truck. It was me. Story 70. I was trapping cats at a rural property with the owner's permission. I had taken most of them to the Humane Society and found homes for those the shelter accepted. I kept the ones they would not accept because they were not friendly enough. I paid out of pocket for all spay and neuter procedures. One cat had kittens I could not locate, so I left her behind. One day I received a text saying she had another litter, that she was bleeding, and asking if I could take her to the veterinarian. I picked up the kittens and the injured mother, took her to the veterinarian, and had her stitched up. I told the owner the mother did not make it and that I had surrendered the litter to the shelter. I was the one who paid for the surgery, and I got all the kittens to the Humane Society to be adopted. The owner believed she could sell the kittens for money and was furious that I did not return them. I had to block her because she did not accept my story and sent numerous threatening and insulting messages. Story 71. I have no idea why, but I'm so irritated by Jimmy Fallon. Feels like nails on a chalkboard. It's petty, and I'm sure he's a fine person. I'll keep it to myself or post it on Reddit, I guess. Story 72. My dad dated a foreign exchange student late in high school. She was from Germany and was the daughter of a politician and public figure. The night before she left to return home, she told him she was pregnant. He never heard from her again. Story 73. I am 99% sure I accidentally killed my family dog a few years ago. I was dog sitting for my parents while they were at a wedding. I had set out my medications for the evening, went to bed, and woke up an hour later. That was unusual because I take strong sleep medications. I noticed he was breathing very quickly and he deteriorated, losing consciousness within an hour. I tried, but he was too big for me to carry to the car, and it was about 1 a.m, so I could not reach any neighbors. I called my parents. My mother was calm and said he had not been doing well for the last couple of months. He was 10 years old, and she was sorry she had not mentioned his condition to me. I realized he must have eaten my medications. I stopped trying to move him, put his head on my lap, and let him pass. It was traumatic and sad, and I still feel guilty, but I will probably never tell anyone. Story 74. When I was 25, I had an illegal abortion. I bought medications on the black market and performed the procedure myself. I bled continuously for a month but recovered. I felt bad about it, yet I did not regret the decision because I was not in a good place to raise a child at that time. I have continued to work on myself, and I believe I am ready if I am ever blessed with a child again. I am turning 32 this year. Story 75. My husband was my first kiss and took my virginity when I was 23. When we first started dating, I did not want him to know I had never had a boyfriend because I was embarrassed. I was in my early 20s and had never been kissed or had sex. I lied to him and made up names and stories about previous partners. We are now in our 30s, 3 years into our marriage, and he still does not know this about me. Story 76. I shouldn't have had a child. My regret is eating me alive, like the telltale heart. I'm good at putting on a mask so she doesn't suffer because of my poor mental health. My husband doesn't know because it would break his heart. I can never tell anyone unless I am willing to destroy my life and cause so much hurt. Story 77. When I had cancer, I came to enjoy oxycodone and dilaudid a bit too much. I stopped getting my prescriptions filled, but for a while I used my dad's. He blamed the pharmacy, saying they were shorting him. I never asked for clarification. I just stopped. Story 78. I used to see an older Chinese woman in her late 40s for massage. She was better than the registered massage therapist I had seen for a work injury. I would be naked under sheets because she worked on my legs and glutes, properly draped. On my 5th visit, I had an erection. I am well endowed, so it was very noticeable. She whispered that she could take care of it if I would like. It was easily the most intense orgasm I have ever had. I think the taboo aspect added to the experience. I continued to see this woman twice a month for the next 5 years. I never touched her, and she never removed any clothing. Over time, the session evolved into a legitimate 30-minute therapeutic massage followed by about 30 minutes of sensual work. There is nothing quite like it, to be honest. Story 79. One day on my way to work, it was raining very hard and I had no car. I, a woman, was standing at a bus stop when a grown man pulled up and asked if I needed a ride. I stayed quiet, and for some reason I said yes. He offered to take me to my job, and I accepted. I got into his car, and he dropped me off with no problems. I often think about how that could have gone terribly wrong. Young woman, rainy day, a stranger's car. I never told anyone, but it felt like a miracle and I felt protected. Story 80. When people disrespect and abuse me, I steal from them. Story 81. My friend's dad isn't her biological father. I would never tell. He has always been her father regardless of blood, and no one needs to know otherwise. Story 82. Good Lord. These are heavy answers. The other day I was in an elevator with about 4 other people and my young daughter. There was a fart and an unpleasant smell, and I looked accusingly at my daughter. She giggled. I said sorry, she's gassy today, I guess. It wasn't my daughter. It was me. Story 83. Sorry. I can't assist with requests involving sexual content with minors. Here is a non-sexual, sanitized version suitable for text-to-speech. My cousin and I were both abused by adults when we were children. As teenagers, we turned to each other for comfort and became very close. We are both adults now, happy, and communicate like normal first cousins. We have not continued that relationship and are best friends. No one else knows. Story 84. I was groomed by a married man when I was 14. He was a beloved teacher. He knew how to manipulate me and make me fall in love with him. I live in a very conservative place, and if anyone ever found out, my life would be over. My family would disown me and my community would shun me. Story 85. I was raped by my stepfather as a child. When I got older, I tried to kill him. My stepbrother shot me in the shoulder with a .22 caliber firearm. I never told my stepbrother why. The only other person who knows is my wife, whom I met after disappearing to the other side of the country. My stepfather recently died. My stepsister reached out for sympathy, but she did not get it. They hate me, but they do not know the real reason I am the way I am. Story 86. I stole a Lego B1 battle droid from my school Lego club when I was 7, and I still have it. Story 87. When I was with my ex, he had a best friend I did not get along with. Our personalities clashed, and we had huge, explosive arguments. The fights were usually over stupid nonsense, not anything terrible, but we somehow riled each other up. I never told my ex to stop talking to him. I reiterated that I would never make him choose and that I respected his friendship. I just could not get along with his friend. Words slipped out in the social group about things that had happened between his friend and the friend's ex-wife. I do not know why. His friend came to me and poured out his heart about the many years of abuse he had suffered. I listened, validated him, and have never told anyone. We still do not get along. We do our best to remain cordial, but it is rough at times. When my ex found out I knew things he did not, he pushed at times, but I refused to budge. I might not like the guy, but there are lines I refuse to cross. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.